Genesis 9 to 11. After the flood, shame, structure, and the splintering of meaning. The waters recede, not because chaos has vanished, but because the psyche can now contain it. Life resumes within limits. A promise forms, not that suffering will end, but that erasure will not be repeated. Awareness returns to the world, carrying memory, vulnerability, and choice. After the flood experience, the psyche is no longer in raw survival mode. It has returned to ordinary life, but it is changed. Genesis 9 to 11 explores what happens after awakening, when a person must live again in the world with awareness. Genesis 9. Boundaries after survival. The covenant represents the mind learning limits. After chaos, the psyche needs structure so that life does not spiral back into destruction. The rainbow symbolizes memory, a reminder that collapse has already happened and does not need to happen again. This is not a promise that pain will end. It is a promise that pain will no longer erase the self. Noah's drunkenness shows that awakening does not remove vulnerability. Even after insight, the psyche can regress. Shame arises when inner weakness is exposed. Ham's action reflects the immature mind that looks at vulnerability and turns it into ridicule or power. The curse is not divine punishment. It is the natural consequence of refusing responsibility for what one sees. This chapter introduces moral awareness, not as rules, but as recognition that actions affect the inner ecosystem. Genesis 10. Differentiation of the inner world. The so-called Table of Nations maps the diversification of the psyche. After stabilization, the self begins to express itself through multiple tendencies, drives, talents, and identities. Each lineage represents a way of relating to the world. Consciousness is no longer singular, it is complex. This is necessary for maturity, but it also increases the risk of inner conflict. Difference itself is not the problem. The problem arises when difference is forced into sameness. Genesis 11, the Tower and the Fear of Becoming. The Tower of Babel represents the ego's attempt to control growth. A single language symbolizes one rigid way of thinking that tries to dominate the whole psyche. The tower is built not to reach truth, but to avoid scattering. This reveals fear, fear of change, fear of individuality, fear of losing control. The confusion of language is a psychological safeguard. When one inner voice becomes tyrannical, the psyche fragments meaning so that no single narrative can dominate. Scattering is not failure. It is the beginning of true listening. Meaning must now be discovered through relationship, translation, and humility. Genesis 9 to 11 marks the transition from survival to structure and from structure to fragmentation. The self is no longer unconscious, but it is not yet integrated. Shame, identity, and control emerge as central challenges. This phase teaches that awakening does not end the work. It begins the responsibility of living consciously among inner differences, without forcing them into false unity. The flood ends, but the work continues. The self now lives, not in chaos, but in complexity.